Today's turning out to be kind of a fun day on the podcast, and I'm going to make it even funner, if I can use that term. Turns out that a senior FBI official, we're talking about the guy who was in charge of the FBI's counterintelligence division in New York. This is a fellow named Charles McGonigal. Now, he retired in 2018, so he's not still with the FBI. But this is a guy who was involved in the FBI campaign to depict Trump as colluding with Russia. This is the guy who was involved with Crossfire Hurricane. He was involved with George Papadopoulos. The whole notion that Trump was colluding with Russia was, of course, a lie and a left-wing Democratic scheme to not only explain Hillary's defeat in 2016, but ruin Trump's presidency, possibly even get Trump indicted. Ultimately, it was the basis for one of the two impeachments. And so this guy, Charles McGonigal, is right in the mix. And so, isn't it a delicious irony that this very same Charles McGonigal, this very same FBI counterintelligence division guy, this fellow who was a promoter and participant in the Russia collusion hoax, has now been arrested and charged over, you guessed it, Russia collusion. Now, let's follow this. This, according to the indictment, this guy McGonigal, along with another fellow named Sergei Shestakov, who's a former Soviet and Russian diplomat who later became a U.S. citizen, these guys were apparently providing services to a Russian oligarch named Oleg Deripaska. Oleg Deripaska. And this guy, Oleg Deripaska, is a really bad guy. He owns massive Russian companies, energy companies, and so on. But he's involved in all kinds of bribery. He's essentially a front man for Putin. And the United States imposed sanctions. By the way, these aren't even the recent sanctions imposed over Ukraine, but these are sanctions that were imposed in several years ago. And it was in 2018 that the U.S. Department of the Treasury designated this guy Deripaska as a sort of a national security. He was someone who was named as someone you couldn't do business with. So you had U.S. laws, and the U.S. laws were sanctions against Russia, and they said you can't do business with all these Russian oligarchs who are part of Putin's circle. Well, it turns out that this FBI guy, McGonigal, was working for Deripaska on two counts. One, he was trying to get the U.S. sanctions against Deripaska lifted. And number two, he was also providing services, including research into one of Deripaska's political opponents. And he's not allowed to provide these services at all because this guy is under sanctions. And McGonigal knew that. And the way we know that he knew that is because he set up a whole system of communications and payments with Deripaska, which never involved Deripaska himself. In other words, when he would communicate with the Deripaska people, they'd never name Deripaska. They would use shell companies as counterparties. So, in other words, McGonigal's shell company would sign a contract with Deripaska's shell company, but this was a way of trying to hide the fact that a U.S. senior retired FBI agent was doing business with a sanctioned Russian oligarch. And finally, the payments between Deripaska and McGonigal were hidden. Again, they passed through the shell companies. So all of this shows motive. It shows that this guy knew that what he was doing is wrong, knew that what he was doing is illegal. And the only surprising aspect about this is that it is the Biden DOJ that has gone after him. And specifically, I believe it might even be the Southern District of New York. I'm looking to see. I know the indictment was unsealed in a Manhattan federal court, so most likely, yes, it is the SDNY. And Debbie and I were talking about this, and Debbie's like, do you think that They're taking a risk by going after this guy because he could talk, he could spill the beans, and then a lot of the corruption of the FBI could come out. I certainly hope that that happens. My guess is that they're trying to show that they're even-handed. Hey, look, we even go after our own. Here's an FBI agent who did wrong. And sure enough, if you look at some of the rhetoric coming out of the Biden DOJ, it is self-congratulatory. Look, we operate without favor. Everybody is accountable to the law, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, I'm actually happy that a guy who tried to go after Trump and get Trump, well, finally, they get him.